This is part 3 of this tutorial about 3D box. Honestly, the 3D box doesn't matter. I had people complaining, grumping about boxes not being so beautiful, etc. It's about the 3D layers, tools, elements, ways of thinking, views, etc. Okay. All right, so let's jump in here a little bit and do some things with this. First of all, one of these things is a really practical thing, and it has special considerations when you are thinking about 3D or you're using it with 3D. Pre-composing. So you guys know and have used pre-composing in the past. You grab 2 or 3 layers and made those into one pre-comp composition inside of a composition. And that's great, and that's what we're doing here. But with 3D, it has some special issues. So I'm going to grab all these because I want to combine them to one controllable element. Right-click, recompose, and I'll say box layers. All right, I think that's the way it's supposed to go. So here's the box layers, and I'm inside a composition called box 2. Perfect. All right, so right now I have this box. I can see it's 3D, but when I do something, when I want to do something that's 3D-ish, here you can see everything is acting as if it were on its own layer. And then if I say, all right, well, let me get some controls here. Let me do like one of those cool rotational elements. Why doesn't this have a gizmo and all that? Then I realized this layer isn't even 3D, meaning the pre-comp is not 3D. Aha, well, that's easy enough. Turn on 3D, and yet what I get is this weird kind of flat illusion of a 3D in some views, and then in other views, clearly not 3D, but like this somehow mapped out, spread out, folded out 3D view. All right, so this is, I don't know why After Effects does it this way, but what it's doing basically is saying this pre-comp has its own conditions, own setup, and by clicking making this 3D, you're basically leaving all those elements with their own properties inside of that composition. And what we really need to do is also go the additional step of clicking this collapse transformations box right here, and all of a sudden I can now grab this as one element inside of my main comp. So I'm grabbing these box layers. They're all acting as one. And I can do things like, let's see what happens if we do one of these rotations. You know, it's rotating around that anchor point, but, you know, it's working if I grab, so I might have to bring my anchor point further in. But otherwise, you know, that's already pretty good. I think this should do it. So if I put my anchor point, I think it's snapping right now. Let me take the snapping off and move my anchor point roughly inside of the box. Not sure if this is working the way I want it to. Okay, so there we go. Roughly, I just want to test this. And then let's go back to our normal selection tool. And so now it's the anchor point is somewhere in the center. I'm actually going to undo this and just move it out like here. Just leave it pretty much. I really don't need the anchor point for this at least. But the big point here was this, turning the pre-comped layers, which are all inside of here, double click, here they all are. Putting all these together, right click, pre-compose, so that they become one combined layer that you can influence. And then with that, going in here and turning that 3D. And actually, I wonder, see, turning that 3D, not 2D, and then making sure that you click this North Star, I call it, but collapse transformation button as well. All right, that will set you up nicely to be able to use this. And then we'll do a last thing here with an all-important camera. Actually, I think what we're going to do before we do anything, yeah, we'll do a camera, but after that we'll do a quick light. So I'm going to just stage this. I'm just going to grab this and move it to the center. I'm not going to grab on any of the axes, but I'm going to grab just on the side here, and then I can freeform move it like we've been able to move anything else. All right, cool. Now, a quick refresher on these camera tools or on these view tools, 3D tools. If you hit C, you go to the major, I don't know if it's just whatever was last, but you go to one of the options within orbit, and then if you hit C again, you go over here to the XY tool, and there's some options there about how this is being affected relative to what, to the screen or to your cursor. And then here's the Z, and there's a few options there as well. So I'm gonna, and I'll just go through these. Here's the this one is rotate around cursor. So wherever I put my cursor, it will rotate around, and that's useful because it's just intuitive. All right, and then if I hit C again, I have this XY, and this really is just up down. This is kind of what I had also with just the normal selection. And then finally, let's see, we're going to go C again, and then we have the Z tool. So if that looks like it is getting bigger, it isn't. It's just coming closer. All right. So those are those tools. I do want to try one thing here. I want to right-click, go transform, anchor point, center anchor point in layer content. Oh, it puts it on the side there, but not necessarily where I want it, which would be in the middle of it. Anyway, we don't need it for right now, so I'm not going to worry about that. So what I want to do here is put a camera on here. So I'm just going to do that really easily. Right-click, New, Camera. Gives me this camera dialog box. And the most important thing here is, honestly, you have a few different presets for what type of lenses, and these go along with the lens logic in the physical world. So like a 15 millimeter or a 20 millimeter are very wide field of view ones that allow lots of something like 180 degrees or whatever, left and right. Everything seems magnified, or actually, sorry, not magnified. Everything's is a little bit reduced in size. Whereas these are telephoto lenses, and they have a long throw, and they magnify things with it that they capture. The normal lens range here is like 35 and 50. That's the where spatial relations look the way that we're used to. But in After Effects, I think that matters a lot less than in the physical world. And changing lenses is really easy too, because you just double click the camera layer and change a different lens, and boom, you've got it. More important thing is this 2-node or 1-node. 2-node means that you'll have a focal point that is stuck, kind of like Spider-Man doing like a net thwap thing, and hitting something. A point of interest, as it is called, that is stuck to whatever you want to keep focus on, or you want to keep in the field of view of the camera. And by default, I would say leave that one 2-node camera and leave that on. There's an interesting option here to enable depth of field. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. That works well when you have multiple elements in the scene. Here we don't. So I'm just going to say OK to have this camera 1. And I wonder why it set it off to the side, but doesn't really matter. So here we are with the camera. Let's take a different view here. Go back over here and just choose, let's do top again. All right, so here we can see our camera body, and then here is the box. So I'm going to actually try this again because I want this to be on this element. So let me see, maybe I chose it the wrong way. New camera. I think there's also other ways. It's not really doing what I want. All right, well, we'll stop right there, and I'll be right back after I have this fixed.